Welcome to another episode of Adoption, The Making of Me, an oral history of adoptee stories. I'm Sarah Reinhart.
And I'm Louise Brown. Make sure to find us on the socials at The Making of Me Podcast. Our website is adoptionthemakingofme.com.
Thank you.
Thanks. In today's episode, we will be discussing the adoption paradox, putting adoption in perspective by Jean Kelly Widner, and then we will be speaking to fellow adoptee Patsy.
Hi, Louise.
Hi, Sarah. We're both back in black today.
Oh, we are actually mine is navy, but close.
Close.
It's so hot here. We're in the middle of a heat wave.
I know. I've been looking at that.
The heat dome, I think it's called.
Speaking
Something
of
like
heat, speaking of heat, we have some updates about our event. And the reason I say heat, because Jeff Forney is coming and Stephen will be
Oh,
excited
yes.
about that.
Stephen's going to be, the bromance continues in Minneapolis from Atascadero to DC to Austin to Minneapolis. The
For those
bromance continues.
for those of you that don't know, Stephen Groschel, who helps us also with neat donations, he and Jeff Forney are dear friends and they're pretty funny. We call them the bromance. But so Jeff Forney is on board with our event. If you haven't had your picture taken, make sure to
And
let him know.
but you're bearing the lead, which is our guest.
Yes.
We did our random guest
Yeah.
choose, and it's Candy Schmider. So we're really excited to hear her
Yes.
story.
Candy, and she accepted, and she's coming
Mm-hmm.
with a group of friends, like a whole support group, and they've been changing things in her town, putting things in libraries, and
Yep.
this is going to be
Yep.
neat.
She's definitely doing the work. So
We
yeah,
had
we're
some great
excited.
people apply for that too, so they're all awesome. Please come on the podcast still.
Yeah, and people, please come to Minneapolis. It's going to be great. But we also exciting Jay
Oh,
Corelli. They
yeah.
have a friend coming to play violin for their performance, which I'm so excited about
Me
it. I think that just
too.
takes it to a whole other level.
We're gonna have, we have not seen this. We like this is new programming for us. It's gonna be a
Yes,
whole nother ball game in Minneapolis. We're excited.
yes. So September 11th through the 13th,
Yeah,
get your tickets on Eventbrite. We have it in our show notes
yeah.
everywhere, social media. You can find it easily.
You can find it.
Also, before we jump off, we have our Patreon this Saturday,
Yep. Another 11th, July 11th.
July
That will be
11th.
exactly 2 months out.
You're right. You're right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And a lot of people are joining the cafe to also get to know others. One thing I did put in our Eventbrite is that we're going to have a Zoom before, just for people who would maybe like to meet somebody before the event. But the best way is to get to know people on Adoptee Cafe.
exactly.
So join.
All right. Well, I will see you in a minute for the book.
See you in a minute.
Hi, Louise.
Hi, Sarah.
Here we are for The Adoption Paradox, Putting Adoption in Perspective by Jean Kelly Widner. We are on chapter 18, Essentials for Adoptive Parents, Attachment.
Attachment. This is big. And we always do the quote. I thought adopting was the end, but I found it was the beginning. Lori Holden. Boy, isn't
Mm-hmm.
that the truth, Lori Holden?
Yep. That, no, I don't think by reading this that even current adopt hopeful adopters are necessarily prepared for what the real truth is. So I'm
No.
glad this book, Relinquish, I'm just glad all these books are out there and adoptees' voices are out there. Yeah. Um,
There was more on that, but we're postponing that.
yes.
I saw you had a thought.
I had a thought. Okay.
Yeah.
The
So,
Going into the first 1,000 days, could a distressing pregnancy influence an infant's development before birth? According to a study in 2006, researchers found maternal stress and trauma exposures during pregnancy are associated with maternal reports of increased infant distress in response to novelty, poor recovery from distress, fearfulness, and difficult temperament.
yeah. We just recently interviewed somebody who is a therapist for pre-verbal trauma.
Yes, yes.
And utero trauma, like what happens in utero in the first
Mm-hmm.
few weeks of life. And it's so important. And science is
Very.
backing it. And people are just, yeah, here we go. The pre birth. Within the formation of the human brain, the amygdala is conventionally referred to as the fear receptor. And prenatal stress is shown in several studies to increase its volume in certain conditions, such as mothers with chronic depression or women showing higher cortisol levels. But this is also everything is coming down to the child. Like if you're, the stress from the mother is coming in. You know your mother though. I mean, this she gets into all the science, which I like.
And then, yeah, then she was talking to, there was a therapist, Jen Winkleman, an
Yeah.
adoption competent therapist, and she says, when we talk about the uterine experience, that time is basically a template for where the
Yeah.
baby's brain starts.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a template. And also someone else brought up this book. A baby's thinking brain or neocortex does not develop until age 3. Before then, what's mostly present are not thoughts but feelings.
Hmm.
From the book, this is the book I'd never heard of, and it's twice in a short time. From the book Mother Hunger, Kelly McDaniel lays out the importance of early childhood attachment.
Hmm.
I'm going to read that.
A body-based emotional experience informed by the early environment. So for like that translates to feelings are facts,
Your
right?
feelings are your facts, and
Your
that,
feelings are your facts when you're that
yeah,
young. Separation from from a familiar caregiver means danger.
yeah,
If an infant is separated from their mother after only a few days or even a few hours, as will often happen in adoption, then this tiny baby's body is absorbing this disruption, which is stored in their unconscious
yeah,
memory banks.
yeah. In the nervous system too. The emotions are stored in the body's nervous system.
Hmm.
And the feelings become what are known as implicit memories.
Yes.
So like that's why we pattern. So I mean, it's the memory. That's why no one sleeps, and you're hyper vigilant, and you're whatever. You're going to be abandoned, no matter how
Right.
secure you are in some relation. You're going to
Fight,
be
flight,
abandoned.
the
Yeah,
whole thing. And there's another therapist, Amy
yeah,
Barker, and so she was in Seattle doing a
yeah,
talk to other therapists, like it was a training.
yeah.
And she said to them, when I say the word adoption, what comes to mind? And they're all like, win-win, rescued, beautiful, all the things.
Isn't that funny?
Then she said, okay, now I want you to give me the connection words that come to mind when I say the word abduction. Oh, life-changing, heinous, horrible. So she said, to the developing brain of the newborn, the experience is exactly the same. They have been taken from their mother, and it is terrifying for them. I mean,
That's a
that we
great
have to
image.
go to those lengths to say
Yeah,
this, that, you know what I mean? Like it isn't even, no
yes,
one thinks about it because of the conditioning of
yes.
the that's been there for so long of this is a good thing, win-win, good thing, win-win, lucky,
And these are therapists, and I'm sure in the room full of therapists, they were like, "Way!" I mean, that's mind shift, right?
Yeah,
That's like one of those mind shifts.
yeah. One of those aha moments, as people say.
Yeah, look, and it can damage the brain. This part we know about because of things where people are just they can't come back from it. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
the nervous system of an infant is very vulnerable, and if they sense distress from separation, what occurs in the triggering of a natural fear response. When this happens, the baby's brain will be flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, which can be damaging to the regions of the brain still in development. Which that's why some healing. That's what Paul Sunderland says. Adoptees
Yeah.
will never heal from this, and he's not adopted. He's a trauma therapist.
Yeah.
He says you'll never heal, but when you start to recognize what's wrong, you can stop yourself from going down certain paths.
Yeah. And then she gets into the neuroplasticity, right? How
Hmm.
you can help the baby. They need to help the couples understand that their baby has experienced a loss it can't process or verbally express. So that's a good first step in helping their
Yeah,
child heal.
yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah. Incredible evidence that sensitive parenting plays a casual role in
yeah,
recovery.
yeah.
Um,
Parents need to show up expecting anything other than a blank slate.
yes, anything other than a blank slate. This is not a blank slate.
Yeah, that's the good name for a book right there.
Yes, exactly. I like how yes, and adoptive parents may be asking what happened to their beautiful adoption dream and picture postcard family. Yes, it can be beautiful and ultimately the right decision. creating a positive experience for the adoptee, which should always be the goal. And it also has some inherent trauma and loss involved by separating a baby from its mother. The child may, in fact, be grieving this preverbal loss, but have no ability to communicate that.
Yeah.
Well,
I
of
think,
course, grieving.
yeah.
Of course, every adoptee separated from their mother
Yeah.
is grieving. There's no, how do you not, like, how is that not a thing? How do we not?
I just think about it like our children when we had them as babies. If I was out of the room for an hour, Jack would cry and cry,
I know.
and you think about it, I mean, it's hard to picture ourselves like that, but we were these babies. So many of us and all of us listening that are adoptees were these babies. And it's sometimes mind blowing, even at this stage,
Yeah, truly.
right?
Well, they can, here's what, adoptive parents acknowledge the children's right to feel as they do before they responding. This goes a long way to establish a bond that lets openness and
Mm,
talking flourish so healing can begin and their children can thrive.
that's good. Let's hope so. Should be given to every parent that's
Mm-hmm.
going to adopt or
Yes,
has an adopted child so they can kind of start steering the right course.
exactly.
A great book. Chapter 19 is next, outdated advice and the importance of openness. Outdated advice.
Outdated advice.
Is
Yeah.
what we're saying.
So, okay, well, I will see you in a minute for Patsy.
See you in a minute.
Hello. Today we have someone coming to us from Amarillo, Texas. Welcome, Patsy. Happy to have you.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to finally meet y'all.
It's nice to
Yes.
meet you. How are you doing? So, you've never told your story on a podcast before.
No, I've told my story many times. I am in the process of writing a book, have actually been working on it for many years. Hopefully that will come together. I'm not even going to set a deadline because I keep missing the deadlines. Yes, I would love to write a book because it has definitely been a journey.
Yeah.
Well,
And
tell us however you want to dive in. Where were you born? Let's
I
start
was
with that.
born in Amarillo, Texas.
Okay.
I have no memory of not knowing I was adopted. I have always known. I think I knew just in my soul, and they never even had to tell me. My adopted parents did not have to tell me. I just knew. I've always done research since I was probably in elementary school. I just have always been very genealogy minded. Um, when my kids now want to know how somebody's related, they just ask me because they're like, we don't understand it. Just ask mom. So I was born to through an affair. My mother was 21 years old. I was child number 5.
Was she was married
She was married at the
oh,
time.
and had 4 kids already at 21?
Mhm. So
Wow.
her first 2 kids were not her husband's children.
okay.
And then she met a man. She was pregnant again for the third time. He went ahead and married her. He raised those 3 kids. Then they had a child of their own. He was in the military. He was
Mm,
gone overseas. She had an affair. I was the product of that affair. I was born before he came back home. He thinks I am a family friend. He knows who I am. If I run into him on the street, he thinks I'm Patsy. He'll stop and talk to me, ask me how
ah,
things are going. Um, but he has no idea that I am his wife's child.
so they're still married.
Yes.
And and you were adopted and you all live in the same town?
Yes, for the most part. Now they still live here, but they were gone for several years with him being in the military.
Oh,
And then they lived in San Antonio for a while after he got out of the military. They did have one child after me. That is the only one that I have any sort of relationship with. The others are just too interested in keeping her secret. I'm the problem.
mm.
Well, let's back up.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so number 4, she gave you up for adoption.
I was number 5.
Number 5, while he was away. So he
Right.
didn't have any idea of you. And
No,
nobody told him in all those years.
nope.
How,
Nobody's opened their mouth. I'm a big
how
secret.
did she hide this?
She was a heavy set lady. So, and back in the 60s, they weren't wearing these little tight, cute clothes showing off the belly.
Yeah.
So, her friends and some of the family knew, but,
I mean, to that point, my first mother, no one knew.
yeah,
So it
Well, of course,
definitely.
but I mean, you're on the army base. Was she on the base or anything? Or
no,
just,
they
oh,
lived,
okay. So they
lived in
had
town.
separate housing and
Well, yeah, they had separate housing. I don't know if they were ever on the base or not, but at that time they were not on the base.
that's a big
Just
thing. Wow. So
living
you're
in
the
town.
only child given away.
Mhm.
But so the adoption agency kept you in the same city where they were?
It was a private adoption
Oh,
Mm.
because my adopted parents were much, much older. They were actually too old to adopt. They
okay.
were 44 and 46.
Hmm.
Yeah, they were at the same age as my biological grandmother.
And did they have other kids?
No, my mother had been married before, and back in the 40s, she had one child that died at 4 days of age and never could have any more kids. And when her and my father got married, they never had children. And
So suddenly in their 40s, they decide they want kids?
they always wanted kids, but it just, didn't. Now, they didn't get married. They were older when they got married, probably, well, not older, late 30s
Okay.
when
Well,
they
older for
married.
then. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
when
they
you say
just,
private adoption, is this through a doctor? I'm wondering, like her
no,
doctor?
my
Oh,
biological mother, no, excuse me, my biological grandmother was an acquaintance with my adopted mom.
okay.
And she knew that my adopted parents wanted children, just couldn't have any. So she saw this as an opportunity to get rid of this child of her daughter's, me.
Mm.
So she's like, hey, y'all interested in adopting? I'll set you up with my daughter. And this was very sudden. In November, I was born in December. So they had very little time to prepare. So there is an attorney in town that facilitated it all. I have since gotten the records opened. I got them opened in 1993 because that's about all you could do back in those days, just try to dig for any info.
Right.
My biological mother was kind of around a little bit, so she always knew where I was at, but she was not in my life at all. She had to stay totally out. My adopted parents were as close to perfect as possible. The only problem is much too old. I am not a fan. When I see people doing that now, I cringe. I want to scream. I want to holler. Don't do that. It's not fair to the child. My adopted father died when I was 15. My
Mm.
adopted mother was dead by 23. They never saw their grandchildren. So, there I was, orphan again. I'm
Mm.
not, they didn't do anything wrong other than they were just too old
Mm.
to adopt. And that creates a whole nother problem that some of us adoptees run into later in life because we don't have that extended family. So that meant all the extended family was also older. So I watched all my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, everybody was dead by the time I was in my 20s.
Mm.
Now, if they knew who your mother was, did they tell you anything? I mean, there you are digging for records, but they had the information.
They had some, but you got to figure this is back in the 60s. It just wasn't talked about. There was no open adoption. Um, they did tell me that they knew who she was, but they didn't have any contact. And I believe at that point they did not have contact because they had moved away.
But were they willing to give you her name? Kind of was more
Um,
my question.
yes and no. They said they never talked bad about her. They just said, she had a lot of kids. I was a product of an affair. That I did have siblings. That always interested me. And that they knew she wasn't here at the time.
Mhm.
And that, she was very poor and that she just, couldn't do anything about keeping me. So
So
that's about
you,
all the information they got. Now, as I progressed in age, my mother did tell me that she had a few documents, but we just never got around to me seeing them. Well, I was a very mature child. So one day I had to go to the safety deposit box at the bank because that's what everybody had. I found a letter from my birth mother in there.
oh,
Well, I'm a little bit nosy. I took it. So I had that from about the time I was 13 or 14. And so I had her name. I never told my mother for many years that I had that name. And I started doing research at that point in high school. I drove by the house that was on the
I was
address.
gonna say, did you
Yeah,
look her up?
I
Yeah.
tried, but you got to figure back then there wasn't anything but the city directory at the library.
Mhm.
There was no internet. There just wasn't a lot of tools.
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
and I did ask several times who my father was. I said, "Does my mother know who my father was?" And they said she really doesn't know who. Well, this is what they said. She's not sure which one it is.
That's rude.
Well, it was the truth.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it ended up being the truth. So at that point, I just kind of just hung out. I did figure out who she was, and then one day I came home from I was in my senior year, and I came home early, and my mom said, "I need to talk to you." My father's already passed at this point, and I said, "I don't know why. I knew. I just knew." I said, "What does she want?" Because I knew that when my mom wanted to talk to me, that my birth mother had called.
Mhm.
And she'd left a number for me to get a hold of her. It was to my biological grandmother's house. I put it off for over a year. I wasn't ready. I was graduating high school, fixing to go to college. I just wasn't ready to deal with her. And so I put it off, and then I finally called. I called the grandmother's house. Oh, let me back up a little bit. In the meantime, I drove by the grandmother's house. I stalked them like crazy. Drove by. I was trying to figure out which one of these kids was my siblings who all lived there. I could see aunts, uncles, because people would come and go to this house all the time. So I'd kind of scoped out who was there and who my siblings were. So I called the grandmother's house because I couldn't call Linda's house. Linda's my biological mother because her husband was still in the picture. So I told the grandmother who I was, and I said I was told that I needed to reach out to get a hold of my biological mother through you. And she said, yes. She's very rude. She said, uh, let me get one thing straight. You're not my grandchild. Good thing it wasn't today because she would have gotten an earful. But, I'm 19 years old. I just didn't know what to say. I just said, well, I'm not looking for a grandmother. I'm looking for my mother. And I got the number and then just, went on from there. I did meet my birth mother in 1983. I was super excited. I was hoping for answers. I knew I had siblings, so that was my first thing. When can I meet my brothers and sisters? How many do I have? And that's when she dropped the bombshell that nobody knew about me and that she did
Nobody.
not plan on telling anybody. So she opened up to me and then slammed the door. And I gave her many, many, many years. That was 83. I gave her till 1987. She kept promising me she was going to tell my siblings. She didn't do it. So finally, I walked over to my youngest brother's house and said, I need to talk to you. And I sat down with the documentation I had and told him who I was.
How old was he at the time?
He's 2 years younger than me, so he was like 23 and I was like
Oh,
25, something like that.
pretty
And
young.
how did he handle it? Did
He
he
was,
take it well?
yeah, he took it really pretty well. And that's the one I still have a relationship with. And then he ended up telling the other siblings that did not go well because they all want to protect her and still do to this day.
Is
Um,
she still alive?
she's still alive.
And you're not in contact.
Yeah,
Oh, oh,
every
you
once
are.
in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I call her. I'll take her to lunch every once in a while. It's just very hard because she's just so secretive. She's made it so
Yeah.
hard for me to find any information. There's just a lot of things that play into it because the family is DNA has really opened up a lot of Pandora's boxes with this family. There's a lot of skeletons that have not just fallen out of the closet, have exploded out of the closet with their
Oh,
DNA. And of course, I get the brunt of it because since I'm the one that did DNA and I opened this Pandora's box, it's all my fault that all of these skeletons have fallen out.
well, you're not the only one who did DNA.
No, but it
Yeah.
has opened up a lot. There's other children that were given up for adoption within the biological family that has come to
Oh,
play. Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories that I could tell you, but so of course, I was very close to my adopted father, who was Aubrey, and I immediately wanted to know who my birth father was. And I think that
mhm.
just comes from I was closer to the adopted father than the adopted mother. And she, at that point, was telling me, I don't really know which one it is. I think you look the most like Joe. So I used to call him G.I. Joe
G.I.
because he
Joe.
was from the air base. But she was not going to give up that information. She planned on going to her grave with that. And I was just lost. I mean, I tried for years. So I kept her little secret, thinking if I gain her trust, she'll eventually tell me who my father is. Well, many, many, many years later, so from 1983 all the way to 2018, she still hadn't given up that secret. She's not going to come clean with it. So I finally decided to do DNA. And before then, I had done everything. I petitioned the court. I got my records open in 1993. Of course, it was all falsified. And that had to do with the judge knowing, the attorney knowing. They all falsified these records from day
So
one.
corrupt
Yep.
and illegal.
I know, I
Illegal.
was gonna
Yes,
say.
illegal. Very much illegal. Um, so in December of 2017, I spit in the tube and sent it off. And I remember being at the post office and I'm just like, I just took this little box and I'm like, prayed over this box. And I said, just God revealed to me who I'm looking for. Well, he did.
Oh,
So January 4th, 2018, my results came in and I had a very high match. Um, and it was a half sister on the paternal side. I did not know anything about centimorgans for the DNA.
yeah.
Well, I do now. I started diving in deep, and I figured out really quick that that was a half sibling. And I knew it had to be on the father's side because we're only 43 days apart.
Oh,
So luckily, she had an unusual name. Thank God for Facebook. So I just typed her little name in, and there she popped up with 37 mutual friends.
oh, come
Right,
on.
because was she
Right,
too in
right.
Amarillo?
Yes.
I bet.
That's nuts. The
That
whole
is nuts.
Yes. And so I ended up looking at the mutual friend list,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, which one of these friends am I going to call? Because somebody's giving me information right now. And I called over to a guy I went to high school with, and I said, ask him where he was at because he sells insurance. So he's usually out just
Mhm.
working. And I work a mobile job as well. And he told me where he was. I said, you're not far. I need you over here now. I said, this is a 911. And he came and I told him what was going on. And he says, okay, give me a minute. He picks up his phone.
Oh, come on.
Here's her number. So
Now, had she not checked
I mean,
DNA
literally the
to
results had just come in like an hour
Oh,
before.
Oh,
okay.
I
okay.
mean, I
Okay.
I was on it, the second I got that little ding, your
Yeah,
results
she's
are
like,
in.
hasn't even gone to her email.
Yeah, she hadn't even seen anything. And so I called and I left a message and, just something of the sort of, hi, this is who I am. You're a really high DNA match. Can you please give me a call? And I waited. So later that day, the phone rang and it was her. And she said, I knew I would get some phone calls when I did the test.
Oh.
And I went, okay. And of course, my first question was, who are you? And I said, I'm 99% sure we are half sisters and through our father. And she said, he is deceased.
Oh.
I can get, yeah, he was already gone. I can get you some information. And she was willing to meet me. So we met up the very next morning um, at the little coffee shop. And, she was very nice. She said, I wished I could tell you awesome stories, rainbows and butterflies, but I can't. Uh,
Mm.
he was not a good man.
Okay.
Mm.
And
How was it meeting her? Like
it
when
was
you,
great. It was great. Yeah. We still talk, not super often. She used to live here. She moved down to the Dallas area about, gosh, I lose track of time. I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. It's probably been almost 2 years since I've actually seen her in person,
but
but
you felt
we do chat back.
connected?
But,
Yeah, yeah.
but,
There's a
but
connection.
so she said he's not a good man. Did he raise her or
He
what?
was
Did
in
she
her
expand upon
life.
that?
Yeah, he was in her life. So, um, long story short, he has 8 children, 7 different mothers.
Oh, okay.
There's only so this lady is the oldest. Then there's me. Then there is the brother that was given up for adoption. We didn't find him till later. He is 5 months younger, so he had 3 women pregnant at the same time. Then he had another child with, I'm just going to say their names. They're all first names. So there's Perry, me, Jean, Christy, uh, Julie, Cheryl, Tammy, and Lori.
Wow.
So yeah, it's it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was with their mother for a short while. Then he was with some other women, obviously. And then there was 3 in total given up for adoption. He
Wow.
probably did not know about me or the brother Gene. And he just didn't have a clue. The rest of them he did. He did raise one of them, that is the youngest one. And she has good memories of him, even though she said, she knows that he had this past and things weren't great. But he obviously was a ladies' man.
Yeah.
From what I've talked to several people, several other older relatives that I have met that were his first cousins and things. They all say the same thing. Very charismatic, could sell snow to the Eskimos, ladies' man, but he had a problem with relationships and having multiple relationships. So it will not surprise me if there's not more siblings. We haven't had any pop up in a while, but I won't be surprised. Um, he he was lived in Amarillo a lot, but he lived in Houston area. He's lived Big Spring area. He's lived around Texas, so he was all over the place. But I mean, all the siblings, he was the biological father was very much had the entrepreneur um,
Mm.
gene in him, I guess. I mean, he was very successful at anything he did. He didn't always have long-term success, but he had short-term success at anything he did. Like I said, very charismatic.
How do you
But
know he didn't know about you?
well, I think it was pretty much a 1 or 2 night stand and then never saw her again.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And since she didn't quite know who it was, she didn't necessarily go trying to track him down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she swears now that she never ever met this person. Now that I finally told her who it was, she said,
Wow.
I don't know that person. Okay. Well, you did at least once. And then from what we understand from the little bit of information that my brother has, is that his mother was sent to Oklahoma for whatever reason to have this
Uh-huh.
kid. And you know, so more than likely it was somebody that got pregnant and her
Yeah.
family sent her away. And, you know,
He's like helping the adoption industry just
yeah.
single-handedly. Oof.
Mhm. Yeah, and then there was another sister that he did know about, and his mother facilitated that adoption. Again, it was just a private adoption, and
So
she's
have you met you've met
met
them all?
every single one of my paternal
Okay.
siblings I have met. Um, I have a close relationship with one of them that lived here, and that she just moved away almost 2 years ago now. And her kids have come and stayed with me. We've gone on vacations together. We talk pretty often. Uh, I'm the closest with her. It's just
Hmm.
the others all live far away. I have a sister in New York. It's an attorney. We are all very successful, either business people or professionals, or
That's interesting.
small business owners. So that must have all come from.
Yeah.
I mean, there's good things that come from his side, just not everything.
Have you all gotten together as a group?
Never been all together.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think we've had five at one time together. And we've had a few times we've had four, and several times we've had three or four, but never all eight of us together.
It sounds like he more had more of a sex addiction.
I
Yes, I
think.
didn't want to say that.
Not necessarily a bad,
No.
not necessarily a bad person, just had an addiction.
Well, and he did have some other issues too, but
Mm.
definitely that is one thing that some of the older family members that actually knew him,
Hmm.
and one of my sisters, uh, her relatives on her other side of the family that knew him have said the same thing. They all say that he had a huge sex addiction and it was a problem.
Hmm.
And then he did do some prison time for like some embezzlement and things like that. So,
Mm.
but I did not meet him. I regret, even though he was not a perfect person, I still regret not meeting
Of
him.
course. Of course.
And I have a problem with the biological mother that just she wouldn't even help. She wouldn't
Yeah.
even try to help me figure out who it was. She was not interested because I think she probably thought it was one of her husband's friends, and that would have, caused a problem.
Because
But
they're still together. Yeah.
oh yeah, they're still together. And they're in their mid 80s.
Ugh. And he knows nothing of you. So you're around. This is Patsy, family friend.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
odd.
Does he not see any kind of resemblance
Oh, and
between the two of
there's
you?
a
I
huge
mean,
resemblance. And one of my nephews, I mean, one of my nieces and my oldest daughter look like twins. And he has seen that before because he's commented on it, and I just blew it off and kept changed the subject.
what did he say? I mean, that is,
He kept
denial is not a river in
Yeah,
Egypt, is it?
he kept looking at my oldest daughter, Christina, and he looked back at me and he kept looking at her. And finally, he just said, "She just looks so much like my granddaughter, Samantha." I just said, "Oh, yeah, she does favor her. They do favor each other." That's just kind of weird. I just kept on talking.
And people
And
see what they want to see, right? You never know what he kind of gets wind of or thinks, or yeah, it's like that.
yeah, I have no
It's
idea.
and the fact that they all know, all
Yeah,
those kids
right.
know, and he
So do all
doesn't.
the
I mean,
siblings. Yeah. And then,
Seems crazy.
so after my DNA results came, that's when I really started diving in to the family tree because I thought, okay, finally I have answers
Hmm.
now. My biological mother had done some research on her family tree. So I did have some of that, and I thought, great, now I only have to find the father's side, start doing some research. Well, DNA gave me a very, very big surprise. My biological mother and my biological father, their birth certificate fathers were not correct.
So wow, there's down the line here.
so they each were NPEs,
Yeah.
non-paternal
Yep.
events.
Yes, both of them were. And I thought, you know what? I did not come this far to not figure this out. So I went on a mission and I was able to determine who both grandfathers were. I
Oh.
have met both of those sides of the family and gotten a wealth of information. Um, my paternal grandfather was a very upstanding man, married 67 years, had 3 great kids, uh, wonderful wife. I did not get to meet them. They had already passed. But apparently he probably had a one-night stand with my biological grandmother right before he met his wife. And then because I've determined they were
So
in their own little
would that
town,
have been in like the 30s or the
30s?
40s?
30s,
40s,
right?
40s.
40s.
Yeah, the
You know
40s.
what's sad about this is you're a wealth of information to all these people too. Like if they're interested in who they are, it's like, come
Some
on.
of them are interested, but I think they're afraid to ask too much because if the conversation gets started in a family situation,
Sure.
what are they going to say? And then my, and luckily with the paternal grandfather, that side of the family, one of the cousins, my second cousin, is a member of DARS and
Oh,
all of that. So
mhm.
she's like, oh my gosh, like
Oh, you got
information
everything.
central. And
Yeah.
so when I contacted her to try to figure out who my biological grandfather was, she was on it. She helped me, educated me. She's just a wealth of information. And that entire side of the family has been so generous, so nice. Then, whenever I started looking for my maternal grandfather, that took so many twists and turns. It was insane. And it took me a little over a year to work that puzzle. And that one ended up being, okay, I have to make sure I say this right because it gets so confusing. My biological grandmother had an affair with her aunt's husband.
Okay.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Was she
How
old
old
enough?
was she?
Yeah.
she was younger,
Like
so there was
minor?
probably a 15-year difference in her and the father, the
But was
grandfather.
she an adult?
Oh yeah, she was an adult.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was worried a little bit about, yeah.
No, no,
So
no, no.
her raising uncle, basically.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
That is who my biological grandfather is. And that side of the family, again, they have been so gracious. I've actually been to a family reunion. It's been very
Fun.
weird because I was looking at people and there was one lady there that looked exactly like my birth mother. I had to go over and apologize. I said, I'm sorry for staring, but you're the first person I've ever seen that looks like my mother. And
Gosh.
it was her first cousin. And but he did not have any other children. And so there's, nothing to go back on that. But it was definitely all the DNA has proved that. So I have all the trail on that. It's been just
Did you tell her?
Yeah, I
And
was wondering.
yes, I've told her and she doesn't want to believe it, you know.
that her great uncle is her father? She doesn't want that information?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. But she just doesn't believe that the guy that raised her is not her father.
Yeah.
And,
She doesn't believe in DNA.
I don't think she wants to believe in
Right.
Yeah. What you want to
Denial
know?
runs strong through that
Yes, it
family.
does.
Yeah, so okay, here's another twist in this little thing. When I was 3 years old, not quite three, my adopted parents got notification from my biological aunt that she was pregnant. She had gotten pregnant. She went to her sister, which is my birth mom, said,
Hmm.
hey, who took your kid? Maybe they'll take mine. And so they
Oh, they did.
did. I have a sister that is my
Oh,
biological cousin. We were raised as sisters. Her name is Teresa. And then
Did
about
did
you
you
know?
know that? Yeah.
Yeah.
we knew we were told you are blood related. I mean, that's all a little kid can understand.
Hmm.
But my sister didn't really realize that we were adopted. And of course, I was not sometimes the nice big sister. She made me mad one day, and I'm like, those aren't our real parents.
Yeah. Right, of
Like,
course.
oh my gosh. Anyway, she just didn't know. She was oblivious to it. But
Wow.
we grew up as sisters. We are still very close. We live in the same town. Now, another kicker, a few years later, that same mother got pregnant again. They told her it was a boy, and they asked my parents to adopt. And at that point, my parents, thank God, had some foresight and said, we're just too old. We can't take another one. So that child was given up for adoption. And then, of course, I started looking for her after DNA, or them after DNA. And so my sister did her DNA, my cousin's sister, and it came back. This match came back, and but it wasn't a boy. It
It's a
was a girl.
girl.
And the biological family lied to my aunt, telling her she'd had a boy. She had a girl
Why did they lie?
because they didn't want her to ever find this child. It's
Oh,
just all these secrets. It's just this whole family is about nothing but how can we keep all these secrets?
Well, as it turns out, your grandmother
yeah.
had the affair. No wonder she's
Oh,
so
yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. And
gripped
more than
tight
that,
to.
so far I've proven that
Yeah.
three of my aunts and uncles are not full aunts and uncles. There was many affairs.
Wow.
Did this child end up in a decent home?
Yes, she did. And
Okay.
actually, it was in 2019 that her DNA, of course, it matched me because she is my cousin as well. But then, of course, it matched my sister as a half sibling. And
Oh,
so
right.
I messaged her, and she was like, do you have any information? I said, I have all the information you will need. And she was a teacher. She had not retired yet at the time. And it was Martin Luther King Day, but their schools were still in session. So she said, can I call you after school? And I'm like, absolutely. So I had to tell her that her mom had passed away, but I was able to tell her, who she was, and that she had a half brother and a half sister. And
And was she still in Texas?
no, she was adopted. I felt really bad after I heard her story because me and Teresa went straight home with our adopted parents. They were at the hospital when we were born. We went straight home with them. Because they did not have a person lined up
Oh,
for her, she went to a children's home for I think 3 to 4 months
long
here in
time.
Amarillo. And then she went to the Missouri, she's like Springfield, Missouri area
Mhm.
is where she grew up, and she's still there. And I think that she is half Thai. Her dad was from Thailand. He was on the air base with the Taiwanese Air Force. And he never knew that my aunt was pregnant. And then he went back, and I'm trying to help her find her birth father, but that's a challenge because
I'm sure.
there's just no DNA. There's no close matches. It's like,
So she knew she was adopted because, first of all,
yeah,
you're half Thai and you're living
yeah,
in Missouri, and
exactly. Yeah, she knew.
yeah,
And
Maybe in the Air Force records at the base
right,
during that
right.
time. Have you
I'm
tried?
looking. We're
Yeah.
looking. We just don't have, we have a name, but we don't know if it's a first name or a last name.
Okay.
And again, the biological family has got some pictures floating around, but nobody will help us. Um, they're too afraid of all these secrets. Um,
And
yeah.
your story is just, it reminds me of, like, the depths to which adoptees really, we want to know who we are. Like, I'm thinking about your years and years and years of this, right?
Yeah,
And
years.
other people are like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just
It's
a,
just so many layers.
yeah,
And,
right.
I look back on my life and how some of the things from adoption have impacted me.
Yeah, I wondered that because you kind of brushed over your
Hmm.
youth.
Yeah, there's just so much. I even tried to make notes, but there's so
Yeah.
much. I could talk for hours. That's why I'm trying to write this book, because there's just
You
so many layers.
you did mention that you were closer to your adoptive father than
Yeah.
your mother. So was
Right.
she just sort of shut down, cut off?
No, no, she was actually great. And I don't really know why I was closer. My adopted sister was closer to our mom,
Mm.
and I was closer to my dad. And I think it's because I had more common interest with him. He
Mm-hmm.
was a builder and a contractor, and I was always out in the garage with him. I knew how to run saws and, all kinds of things. Had my own little carpenter overalls from the time I was a tiny child. So I was always under his wing, and I would go to the job sites with him when I was like 10, 11, on up until I was 15 when he passed. And my sister just wasn't. She was a tomboy. She was more worried about running around the neighborhood with the boys and climbing trees and then, I don't know, but I just was always closer to my dad.
Yeah.
And, if I needed to talk to somebody, I went to dad, where my sister went to my mom. And, we just, they just were such amazing people.
Yeah.
And
So nice.
yeah, they were super nice. But like I said, my grandparents were born in the 1800s. And they were all of them, but one was gone. So I never had grandparents. So that's another layer that adoptees that are adopted to older people, we
Yeah.
don't have grandparents usually. We have aunts and uncles, but they're all older, so they're all sick. We lost 18 family members in 18 months.
Wow.
They were all just dying. Cancer, and that was also the era when people were not that healthy. My parents were chain smokers.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. And I guess that's one good thing. I just like despise it. I just don't want to be around it. I had no desire to do it. So I guess that is one plus.
Yeah.
But like I said, all of them passed away. And I think I got off track a little bit because I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, you were gonna say about, the adoption thing. You
Uh,
just felt how
yeah,
a little bit about that.
it did. So one thing that I think did not, I realized I was going through something when I had my first child, but I didn't really realize what it was
Mm-hmm.
until many years later, like probably like 10 years ago. When I had my first child, I didn't have a hard time connecting with her. I bonded, but I was very protective, and I don't think the nurses and things understood my feelings. I was like, don't touch her. You're not
Mm-hmm.
taking her out of this room. I was ready to kill somebody if they were going to try to
Mm-hmm.
remove her from the room. And I think that was just that primal wound. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
this is
We experienced that
not,
too. We've
yeah.
talked, so many adoptees have said the same thing when they
Uh-huh.
become parents. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, no, 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 you're not touching her. Absolutely not. Don't take her out of the room. And then she did have to be, back then it was kind of hard to get them to stay in the same room at the same time. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
quite the same. And then she was in the nursery because she was born very late. And so she had meconium, and they were worried about her, but she was perfectly fine. She's fixing to be 40 and she's fine. My next two kids, I had such a horrible experience in the hospital. And I think part of it was because of that fear of being
Mm-hmm.
separated from my child that was embedded through adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And that my next two kids were born at home. I was like, I will never, never do this again. And so I had them at home, and which was a great experience, but that didn't really have anything to do with adoption other than I was very stubborn, and I knew I was not going to be separated from my child, not even for 2 seconds
Yeah.
ever again. And at
But
this point,
it's a thing. It's a thing. It's like it's not just then. It affects them. I clung too tight, right? Like nobody can, that affects them a little bit too.
yeah,
Of
and it
course.
affects their, it affects not just one generation, it
Yes,
affects multiple generations.
it does.
Like, I did not have any problems getting pregnant and having children, but my oldest daughter did, which did not make any sense to me because all I knew was my biological mother's side, and they have babies like rabbits. So,
As did your father.
yes, exactly. But come to find out, two of my paternal siblings had PCOS and had
Mm,
problems and had to have children with IVF. And my daughter had PCOS. So if we had known that, she probably would have been able to have more than one child. But we didn't know. That's another thing that us
of
adoptees deal
course.
with, the
Right.
unknown.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, I'm just really feel very strong about the fact that we have every right to all of our records.
Of course.
And it's still such a problem even today.
Mhm.
And the general public doesn't realize that. I ran into some friends that recently adopted a few years ago and was telling them I was going to be on this podcast. And they were just like, really? And I'm like, yeah, there's just lots of things that I like to, advocate for. And this friend of mine that adopted the child, she's like, what do you mean my kid can't get his original birth certificate? I said, yeah, sorry, it's sealed. And they're like, well, we have his original birth certificate. I said, well, I said, she goes, it has our names on it. I went, no, no,
No,
no,
no, no.
no, no, no. That's the amended birth certificate. And,
How can they, it's I'm
That's
just
an yeah, I
baffled that
know.
that it's still
people
so
buy into this rainbows and
They
yes,
butterfly
do. They
and blank
story.
do.
slate, the blank slate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been told so many times, oh, how lucky you were. You just went straight home with your
Mhm.
parents. And I'm like,
The same.
but then I wasn't a blank slate. If I was, then why did I have all these feelings from, the time I was a little kid?
Of course,
And
right?
they just don't get it.
Well, they
And
don't, yeah, yeah. They're invested in not getting it.
yeah, that's very true, Sarah. I do
Hmm.
agree. I think
Yeah.
people have got their blinders on and
Of
Of
course.
course.
they just feel like that, us adoptees, we should just be grateful. We've all heard the same thing, grateful,
Yeah.
special.
Well, this
And
is why we have this podcast. This is
Yep.
why we talk about this. This is why there's social media and adoptees are very active there to continue to get this
Yeah.
word out and to stop the damage of adoption. So,
exactly.
Getting your
But
book out.
I did petition the state of Texas to get my original birth certificate because I wanted to see. Well, let me back up. In the early 90s, before everything was, so technologically advanced, I went to the hospital where I was born. And you could get away with things back then. I'm just like, my mom's really sick and she's got to get all these records. She needs all of her medical records. So I'm trying to help her gather them up. I knew the name on the hospital records. So I said, now I'm going to be listed as baby girl because she couldn't remember, what she didn't know what she was going to name me. Her husband was overseas. So anyway, that's all these little things I was telling them. And I'm like, this is what the mother's name was. They went through the microfiche and got me all the records. I have my records from the hospital when I was born.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
But you couldn't get away with that now, and all those
No.
records are trashed. But I got that, and then I did petition the court because I was still trying to get my birth mom to tell me who my birth father was. And I petitioned the court in 1993. The judge here in Potter County was Judge Abe Lopez. His court coordinator was an adoptive mom who was very open-minded. And so
Oh,
she talked to him and educated him. And he was very much for opening records. So I got my adoption file sent to me. And again, it was all very falsified. All the
of
fake
course.
names were on there. Um, the doctors, the lawyers, everybody, it was all fake. So then we finally were able to send off for our birth certificates in Texas, which is a slippery slope because if you don't have a little bit of information, they won't try to get it for you. You have to have something or they won't. If they can't match it, they're not even going to try. So it was very much a slap in the face when I got that back, and it's stamped across it in big letters, not for identification.
Hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Isn't that
It's
just
just such a slap in the face. It's like, that's my birth certificate,
right? Of
and
course.
I have no rights to it. And it's just, it
Mm.
is,
It's downright illegal. I
yeah,
say this all the time. Like if we went and tried to do that ourselves right now, you go to prison.
yeah.
I
Mm,
mean, that's the thing, but let's do
Well,
this for
should be
babies.
illegal, but it's not illegal.
No, but I mean it's
Fortunately,
illegal
yeah.
in the sense
It's
of the law,
immoral.
right? I was a pre-law. It's immoral, but it's also using part of the law that's really not legal for
right.
and
And
they adopt it from like the way back when. I mean, it goes back into like the things they can use for that, like slavery times and Georgia Tan rules. But it's really an illegal. If someone would just, it's what Sarah always says: class action lawsuits have to be big.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah, I wish that sometimes I wish we could do something like that. And then, it's like I almost want to, I don't want to have my adoption annulled. My adopted parents did nothing wrong other than they were too old and they shouldn't have adopted.
And they didn't have the information that we have
No,
now,
Right.
and
Yeah,
they weren't given the information about the trauma for the child, any of that.
no.
So,
And I don't think they're not doing a good job of that yet. I
mm-mm.
mean, I know several people that have adopted I just had one of my clients and it was all I could do. I was just,
oh, and isn't that hard?
biting my tongue. And I did tell her, I said, I'm happy for you, but please read this book. And, I'm like, please read The Primal Wound. Um, they were adopting two babies at once, about
Mm.
2 weeks apart. One of the birth mothers decided not to surrender, and they were mad about it. And I'm just like, oh, this
That,
is so
you're like, that's her
wrong.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Patsy,
But
this has just been such an interesting
Mm.
conversation, and what a wild, twisty story you
Wild.
have.
it's very,
I
very,
can't wait till you write your book and get it
Me
out there.
too.
It's
yeah.
gonna
And
really gonna
it's been a lot of fun. I enjoy solving all the DNA mysteries because I just feel like I didn't come this far to just have a tree that's not correct.
Right?
right. Well,
And
I'm glad you're on that fight, and really, it's so great. Thank you so much.
yes, and
Thanks
Really,
I
for,
so wished I could see y'all in Austin.
I
Oh,
I
know.
know.
Well, we'll see you at the next one. We'll keep in touch and keep you posted.
Please.
yes. Thank you
Yeah.
so
Lovely.
much.
Yeah.
Enjoy your vacation.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you,
you. Thanks,
Patsy.
Patsy.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Wow, that was quite a tangled web her family weaved. Am I right?
Well, even more so, we talked to her future. Afterwards, she has just it
Another
keeps going.
bombshell. I
I know.
know. You know what I was thinking during her is that she should be a search angel.
Yeah, that's I was gonna say that. It's so funny you said that. Thinking she could really help people.
Yeah.
She's
We
talented.
should tell her
Yeah.
because I mean she sounds like she gets a bone and she just goes for it
Yeah.
until it's
Yeah.
gone. So
And
I
you know
think
what's
she'd be
fascinating too? She just always wanted to know. That's,
hmm
you
and
know,
like, one of her little mean little girl things was
yeah.
saying to her sister cousin, these aren't our parents.
I mean,
I
like
always
she
think
was,
of
yeah.
Annie in New
Me too.
Zealand, like,
I was
you're not my
thinking
mother.
in the
Like,
back seat at 7.
yeah,
Yeah. I think the same thing, Annie, if you're still listening. It's
yeah,
crazy. I really enjoyed her and she needs to come to an event because she's awesome.
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, what did we say?
Another great episode.
Another great episode. See you next time.
See you next time. Thanks so much for listening today.
If you want to reach us, you can find us at our website, adoptionthemakingofme.com. And you can also go to patreon.com to find us. And we're on all the socials. Thank you.